Hi everybody. This week we've been covering a lot of stuff in the course, and this is in a sense one of the trickiest parts of the course to remember how to do the sort of mental gymnastics you need to do hypothesis testing. And so we're just going to review some of that today by me asking Sara a bunch of questions about how to construct a hypothesis and give her some variables and see how well she can do in answering these questions and constructing some hypotheses, okay? So some of the topics we talked about included constructing a null hypothesis. We talked about one-tailed versus two-tailed tests, and we talked about how to construct a hypothesis at different levels of measurement. So we're going to go ahead and go over some of those through this little quiz with Sara. So the first question, Sara, is I want you to construct a hypothesis for two nominal level variables.
All right, well, a nominal level variable would be your gender, and also another would be your favorite type of film. So the hypothesis would be that your favorite type of film depends on your gender. So gender is the independent variable and the type of film is the dependent variable.
Okay, now I want you to construct a hypothesis between two ordinal level variables.
So two ordinal variables. The first could be support for a political candidate. So actively support, strongly support, moderately support, neither support nor oppose, moderately oppose, and strongly oppose. And a second ordinal variable could be how active someone is in politics. So very active, somewhat active, not very active, not active at all. So then the hypothesis would be that the more politically active a person is, the more likely she is to support this particular candidate.
Now I want you to construct a hypothesis between a nominal level variable and an interval level variable.
Okay, for a nominal and interval level hypothesis, the nominal level could be race and the interval or ratio level variable could be number of hours you spend on housework. So a two-tailed hypothesis would say that the number of hours a person spends on housework depends on their race.
Okay, now I want you to construct a hypothesis between two variables, both of which are at the interval or ratio level.
Okay, so two interval or ratio level variables. Okay, so one variable could be the amount of money you spend on clothes, and the other could be amount of closet space you have in your house. So I could say that the amount of money that you spend in clothes in dollars depends on closet space. So to make it a one-tailed test, I could say that the more closet space you have, the more money you'll spend on your clothes.
Okay, using these two variables, the amount of money that you spend when you go to the grocery store and the number of kids that you take with you to the grocery store, I want you to tell me what the null hypothesis is.
The null hypothesis would say that there is no significant difference in the amount of groceries money spent and the number of children brought to the store.
Construct a one-tailed hypothesis using those two variables.
So the dependent variable is the amount of money you spend on groceries, and the independent variable is the number of children you bring. So a one-tailed hypothesis might say that the more children you bring, the more money you spend on groceries.
Using those, I want you to construct a two-tailed hypothesis.
A two-tailed hypothesis between the amount of money you spend on groceries and the number of children you bring to the store would say that there is a significant difference in the amount you spend on groceries based on how many children you bring, but we don't know if we're predicting that the amount of grocery money goes up as the number of children goes up, or if the amount of grocery money goes down as the number of children goes up.
Okay, Sara, supposing we did an analysis and we found a positive relationship between the number of kids you take to the grocery store and the amount of money you spend. What would you conclude?
If you find a significant relationship between the amount you spend on groceries and the number of children you bring, then we can conclude that not only is the relationship between those two variables significant, but also that one can expect that the more children they bring to the grocery store, the more money they will spend on their shopping trip.
Okay, if we think there's a relationship between the brand of popcorn and the amount of unpopped kernels that are left after popping the popcorn, I want you to tell me what the null hypothesis would be.
The null hypothesis would say there's no significant difference in the number of unpopped kernels by brand.
Okay, Sarah, supposing you have 4 brands of popcorn as one variable, and for the other variable, you have the number of unpopped kernels left in the bag. I want you to construct a one-tail hypothesis using those variables.
So the dependent variable then would be the number of unpopped kernels, and the independent variable would be the brand of popcorn. So I could say that a particular brand A, is more likely to have a higher number of unpopped kernels than the other brands.
I want you to use those 2 variables and construct a two-tailed hypothesis.
All right, the independent variable would be the brand of popcorn, and the dependent variable would be the number of unpopped kernels. So a two-tailed hypothesis of that relationship would say that one of the brands would have a higher or lower number of unpopped kernels, but we're not guessing which one. We're just saying that we do think there will be a significant difference between brands.
Okay, let's say that we found no relationship between the brand of popcorn and the amount of unpopped kernels that were left. What would you conclude from that test?
Okay, if we find that there is no difference in the number of unpopped kernels by brand, then we have to fail to reject the null hypothesis, which means that we might observe differences between the brands, but those differences are not significant. And so regardless of the type of popcorn one gets, there'll be about the same number of unpopped kernels per bag.
Okay, Sarah, I want you to use these 2 variables, the person's race and whether or not they own a dog. And I want you to construct a one-tail hypothesis using those variables.
So race might be measured black, white, and Asian, and dog ownership would be a dichotomy, yes and no. And so dog ownership would be the dependent variable, race would be the independent variable, and we would say that perhaps whites are more likely to own a dog than are blacks and Asians. That would be a one-tailed hypothesis.
Okay, using these 2 variables, I want you to construct a two-tailed hypothesis.
Okay, a two-tailed hypothesis of the relationship between race and dog ownership would say that there is a significant difference between race groups on if they own a dog or not, but we're not going to predict which race is more or less likely to own a dog.
Okay, Sarah, suppose we found that there's no relationship between race and the chances of someone owning a dog. What would you conclude from that test?
So if we find that there is no relationship between race and dog ownership, that tells us that neither blacks nor whites or Asians are more likely than any other group to own a dog. That means we would fail to reject the null hypothesis, telling us that any differences we might find in the data are really not significant.
Okay, well that covers a lot of examples about how to do hypothesis testing and thinking about that difference between one-tailed and two-tailed tests. It's a really important part of the course to really be able to do that little gymnastics flip-flop in your head with the alternative and the null hypothesis. It's going to be important as we go through the course, and in a sense, this is the toughest little piece of the course. So if you get this down, you'll be in really good shape. To make sure you do, we've constructed a bunch of exercises for you to continue practicing the kind of thing that Sarah and I just did. And we want you to make sure you go through all of those. We'll be keeping an eye on how people are doing in terms of getting them right. And if any of them are causing problems, we'll come back on with a video update to really explain those ones to you in more detail so you can be really confident about what you're doing. That's it for this time. So we'll pick up with some new stuff next time where we'll actually put these kind of concepts into action.